Great, thank you, Annie. So if I could introduce Rachel Siegfried of Green and Gorgeous. Rachel is essentially a cut flower grower. And I thought I'd introduce her with a little bit of history. Some time ago, I did quite a long interview with Beth Chatter, and inevitably we talked about how she got started with growing plants, and in particular growing the range of plants that she did. And as Beth always was, she was very to the point, and she knew exactly what how to answer that. And so it was the 1950s, after the war, and of course the 1950s was a infamously dreary decade, and so what really lifted so many people's lives was flower arranging. Flower arranging was a real social movement. Women all over the country were forming these clubs and growing flowers and bringing a bit of life and joy into people's lives. And she was absolutely affirmative that that's really what got her growing plants, but also looking beyond the old favourites. And her friendship with the painter Sir Cedric Morris got her particularly interested in less usual flowers, things like astrantias and euphorbias that don't have the colour and form of the conventional cut flower varieties. So she would very much credit the flower arranging movement not just for her interest in horticulture, but also really the very beginnings of that much wider range of perennials that people started growing really from the 1960s, 1970s onwards. So, Rachel, can you describe what you do?
Yeah. Well, I call myself a flower farmer, and we basically have a 4-acre flower farm where we grow a huge range, literally hundreds of different varieties of annuals, bulbs, lots of perennials, shrubs, roses, I mean, you name it, anything that can really epitomize the English country garden style. I'm looking at plants that are scented, that evoke nostalgia, that have novelty, that are unexpected, things that you wouldn't find in a florist. They're much more from the garden. My garden background is, horticulture background is in garden design. So it's very much coming from that angle. Yeah, and I also do all the arranging as well. So we basically grow our flowers for events, mostly weddings. But we run lots of workshops teaching other people how to arrange with garden flowers, how to set up their own cut flower businesses.
And Rachel, can you just tell us where you are in the country? Because I think that's quite an interesting fact, really.
Yeah, we're in South Oxfordshire, so we're sort of right on the edge of the commuter belt. Nice and close enough to London to attract quite affluent customers, which I think where you are, if you're going to have a cut flower business, is pretty important.
But very often in the winter, Rachel, your area it can be very cold, can't it?
Oh. Yeah, I must admit, I didn't quite realise when I took on the land, I didn't quite realise how cold it gets.
You're quite flat, aren't you? And imagine the frost.
We're very close to the River Thames. We're just literally a water meadow away, and very flat. And it often gets about 3 degrees below Benson, which is near us, which is often recorded as the coldest temperature in England.
Really?
So it's a real battle for us, the colds. It's probably that, and of course flooding are the two things we struggle with sometimes.
Mm-hmm. So I would imagine that getting a really good seasonal spread must be very important for you.
Yeah.
If you could just sort of run through the year, giving some idea of the kind of categories of plants you're working with, really from beginning to end.
Yeah, I mean, because of the cold and because we need to stretch the season as much as possible to make it viable, we do have tunnels. And at the moment, the majority of what we're picking is in our tunnels. So it's all the autumn planted spring flowering bulbs. So I could maybe just pull a few out from here. The first thing we start off with every year are the anemones, and I was actually picking these in January this year. And they have just been incredible. They've gone right through. They'll probably be cleared out of our tunnels next week because this heat, just obviously that's not their thing. So anemones first, and then ranunculus next. This is an incredible variety called chocolate, and you can sort of see. You can see next to my hand how the size of the flowers that we get from those are just incredible. Tulips, of course, we've been picking those for about 3 weeks now. So that's our first batch of focal flowers. I always break my flowers down into focal, filler, and foliage, and I need to grow all of those components to have everything I need to make up bouquets each week through the season. So the season really is kicking off for us properly in March, and running through the other end in the tunnels with chrysanthemums in November. So if we didn't have those tunnels, we'd easily lose a month either side. Once these bulbs are finished in the tunnels, we're really moving outside through to peonies, garden roses. We also have those undercover in like soft fruit growing tunnels. So they just have a sort of giant, it's like having a giant umbrella, but the sides are all open for lots of ventilation. So they're all repeat flowering garden roses. Alongside that, we'll be picking plenty of early flowering perennials, like astrantias is definitely one of those that we use masses of that as a filler. And then, yeah, lots of shrubs. I mean, some nice shrubs at the moment. I mean, things like this lovely phytocarpus, which I was going to put into my bouquets. I love using bronzy foliage, so that Phytocarpus diablo is rather stunning. Flowering shrubs as well, just coming in. Lilac, and I've got some viburnum coming on at the moment. Perennials, that's such a big part of what we do, and I like to use perennials at all stages. I mean, I think this really illustrates what I like to do, is not just look at the thalictrum for its flower and just grow it for that, but actually I'm more interested in its beautiful glaucous foliage. Now I'm trying to remember the variety. Is it Ellen?
Yeah.
Elin. Yes, that really
Yes.
cool one. Yes.
Yeah,
yes,
and it's
fantastic.
got this
Really fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah, it's got quite a smoky. I love flowers that are quite nuanced and perhaps have a blend of colours in them, rather than just a flat colour. So something like that, with that sort of smoky tone to it. I don't know, you probably can't see that on the screen, but it has sort of blush, makes it very special. So to me, it's quite important to look at plants, I suppose, in a different light, and not just, actually I grow a lot of weeds as well. So here, this has to be my favourite weed, which I love to, I grow it in the tunnel, shepherd's purse.
Wow.
How ginormous it is.
Yes, yes.
And it's got so much character to it. It looks fantastic with ranunculus, which it's actually growing in amongst anyway. So
Yes,
why not pick both and arrange them together? I could go on and on for hours about all the different things I grow. I mean, it is a bit ridiculous, but
Rachel, we've had one question already.
Before we leave the subject of spring and bulbs, we've had a query about where you source your bulbs from, and that kind of links into something I wanted to ask you, which was tulips we're familiar with having to realistically replace most years. What about your anemones and ranunculus? Are they reusable, or again,
you can reuse them, and I do know growers that will reuse them. But the problem with that, if you're growing them in the tunnel and you want to reuse them, you've got to obviously let them die back, haven't you?
Yes, yes.
Best out of the corm and the claw.
Mm-hmm.
Now I need to clear them ASAP because I've got all my half-hardy annuals, snapdragons, zinnias and nicotiana, waiting to go in. I grow those in the tunnel rather than outside because you'll get more stem length and better quality. So I use them as an annual. Also, you have the risk of virus if you keep them, particularly Anemones, which is spread by aphid. So, and I look at the labour costs as well. It's actually more cost effective for me to start fresh every year. We do source our bulbs from specialist suppliers. They're not your bog standard, you know, they're special cut flower grade, like the Anemones of Galilee. Galilee, I mean, you see the size of the heads on that. You know, you wouldn't be able to get that from a standard garden type catalogue, I'm afraid. There's a network of growers called Flowers from the Farm, and if you belong to them, we do these kind of group buys where we get the really good quality bulbs in, and then you can just have, you know, you don't have to have 1,000 of one colour. You can just order smaller quantities.
Right, so moving on through the year, are there any particular times when you find yourself with a bit of a gap, or are you able to really run through to the autumn?
No, there are definitely gap times, which I learned the hard way over the years. I would say, and it's probably the same for people's gardens, I would say mid to end of May, or mid-May to the beginning of June is a very tricky time. You always think, don't you, with Chelsea, oh, there's masses, you know, it's such a flowery time, but it isn't it? It's quite green with a lot of buds. So that's why the tunnels come in handy again to force things forward. So, for example, the ranunculus will finish, especially with the heat we've been having, but the peonies won't be ready. So then you have a gap in your focal flowers. So by planting some of the peonies in a tunnel, that will obviously bring them on and fill that gap. The other time that can be very difficult is between the roses. Again, if it's hot, they finish a bit too early. The dahlias haven't started. So again, we bring some of those dahlias and we grow them undercover to force them early, and try and close the gaps.
And Rachel, at the moment, because of the lack of events that must be happening, and you must have a lot of weddings that have been cancelled, it must be pretty awful. I know you do garden gate sales, don't you? I mean, you're selling. So how are you?
Not at the moment, no.
You're not.
I had to stop that as well.
Oh no.
Yeah. So what I've done, obviously, all weddings, courses postponed, farm gate shut. So we've started a field to doorstep delivery service. I've got someone in there packing the buckets as we speak, and that has proved to be incredibly popular.
So people are emailing you orders and you're delivering to their door, is that it?
Yeah, it's a contact free, so we've basically set it up on our website, a shop, where they can just order online. And yeah, it gets delivered to their door. They have a bucket of water outside, and we just give them loose stems into their bucket for them to take indoors and arrange.
Wow. And has that picked up? Has it been popular?
It is. I can't even keep up with.
Really? Yes. Yeah.
How busy it is. Yeah, it's really good.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, thank goodness. Thank goodness.
Yeah, it just helps us. Obviously, it's a drop in the ocean compared to what we'd normally be.
Mm-hmm.
But it does help us to keep our heads above water.
Yes,
It's quite interesting because, of course, I normally grow for event work mainly, so I'm not really worried about vase life, and I quite like that. That's why I can grow such a wide scope of useful garden plants, flowers. You know, I can have poppies and just think, wonderful. They only need to look good for one day. Now, that's not the case if someone bucks of flowers and they expect it to last a week. Also, a lot of the colours I grow are the pastels and the, you know, paler shades, the whites. I've got an awful lot of whites that, again, people perhaps are not so keen on for their houses. Yeah. But you just have to make the best of it, don't you? So,
yes. And in terms of getting plants, we've got another question. Do you grow from seed, or do you generally buy in plants?
I try to grow as much from seed as possible,
Right. Mm-hmm.
Including a lot of my perennials. Obviously, because of the cost, but also I do find you can get some really interesting varieties when you grow from seed.
Yes, yes.
That you might not, you know, you're not going to find in your standard garden centre, for example.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We also do a lot of cuttings, so I might go to some specialist nurseries or plant fairs, and I'm always looking for interesting perennials. That's my obsession, perennials really, and then getting some good, you know, basil cuttings or whatever it needs to be into the and trying to increase stock that way.
We've got another question, actually. We've got the lovely Claire Foster listening, and she's loving the talk. But she's got a very hard question for you. It's if you had to if you had to choose one rose for cutting, which one would it be? Like I was being asked.
Well, personally, if it was just for me, I would choose Margaret Merrill, but she's a bit temperamental, and for most people it wouldn't really work because she likes to cover, otherwise she goes a bit brown. So I think if I was saying for everyone, I would recommend Chandos Beauty.
So just say that again.
Chandos Beauty.
Chandos Beauty. Okay, lovely.
Yeah, it's just that rose actually weathers really well. And, you know, most of you are just going to be growing outside. So you're going to want a rose that can take a bit of rain, that is as healthy as anything. It doesn't need to be sprayed, because we don't spray our roses at all. It's incredibly, the scent is 10 out of 10, which I think if you're going to grow a rose, you've got to have scent. What's the point otherwise?
Yes, yes. Yeah. So in the range of plants you grow, is there anything particular that any particular group of plants that you feel is very much up and coming? At the moment is a bit of a minority interest, but you think might be more important in the future?
Well, I mean, if we're talking a big group, obviously perennials are the ones I'm gonna focus on. But within that, I mean, gosh, there's so many, aren't there? I don't really know where to start with that question. But it depends on your growing conditions, what's gonna suit.
We've also got Rosalind asking your favourite dahlia apart from Cafe au lait.
Yeah, I do like Cafe au lait.
Yeah.
My favourite dahlia is Carolina Wagamons. So Carolina Wagamons is a water lily, and she's kind of, I'm just going to bring out one that's a bit similar in colour, this ranunculus. I don't know, on my screen that looks really orangey, but it's a peachy coral. Carolina Wagamons she starts off quite pale, and then her colour changes. And there's not many dahlias that do quite such a shift in colour, which lovely long stems, perfect for cutting. Yeah.
Somebody else is asking about mulching and feeding.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Well, March is our mulching month, where we pretty much spend the whole month just mulching. And we use green waste, actually, that we get in from the council, which... Yeah, it's pretty, you know, you get a good layer of that on, and it's going to keep all the weeds at bay and keep the moisture in. We try not to overdo the compost, because we found it has caused some issues with mainly our annuals, that it's just actually the soil's been too rich, and we overcooked it, you know, especially in the tunnels. And of course now that's a bit of an issue. We're having to rest areas using green manures, things like mustard, clover. But we do use a liquid feed through our irrigation system, so a fertigation, which is kind of like a comfrey, you know, high potash. So once things get flowering, like sweet peas, roses, dahlias, they are getting a weekly feed.
Right.
To keep the quality up.
And a couple of more questions. Somebody's asking, are you direct sowing? Are you sowing into seed trays?
I actually No, I'm not a great fan of direct sowing.
Too many things can go wrong, can't it?
Yeah, and it's so dry.
Yeah.
We couldn't direct sow now anyway.
Yeah.
I'm a bit of a control freak, so I do like to control the conditions. So a lot of my annuals that do not like root disturbance, they just get sown into modules. Like, for example, all the umbellifers, the Ami, the Dorcas, Larkspur, Nigella, none of them like root disturbance. So they're much happier sown directly into a module, and then those just get planted out. And it's quite a good way to control the quantities that you're actually growing of each variety as well.
Yeah.
And module growing in plug trays, I'm a great fan of that. I mean, there's the main problem, I think, is actually getting hold of plug trays in kind of small quantities as opposed to kind of wholesale pack of 200 or so. But hugely useful.
Yeah. And you need a good, I took years to find the best plug tray out there. It does need to have a nice deep plug. A lot of these modular trays are too shallow and they just dry out in 5 minutes, don't they? So we've got some that are really nice and, about 10 centimetres deep, which means that it buys you time as well if everything needs to be planted out at once.
And Tracy McHugh wants to know your technique for sweet pea growing. Is it strict cordon, or are you letting them roam, or do you have you growing them on a support? Yeah, what's your technique?
Yeah, no cordon. I tried that once and never again. Life's too short. We use P&B netting, and we basically make these very long rows. We've got one in the field that's about 40 meters long, and we plant on either side of the netting, so it creates a kind of hedge. We plant very closely, so it creates this dense hedge, and we use a tape tool to tie in, so no fiddly bits of string. It's a very quick action to tie it in, and then up they go, and just let it all go, because actually I really love picking sweet peas with the foliage and tendrils as well. If I cut the tendrils off, I think you're losing half of the beauty. Sweet pea. Actually, I've got a sweet pea here. So we grow our best sweet peas.
Wow.
Yeah, look at that. In the tunnel. That's where they do the best. Everything always does better in a tunnel.
Yes. Yeah.
And this is a special variety called Spring Sunshine, which is for tall growth. It's from California, so it can take the heat and it doesn't go all short. So it starts flowering in April and carries on till July.
Wow,
really impressive for a sweet pea. Yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, lots of successional sowing, I was going to say, with all my annuals, including the sweet peas. It's not just one sowing, it's little and often to get that succession.
Do you do any autumn sowing?
I do. These ones were sown in October. And actually this year, my outdoor ones, I actually waited till January to sow them. I can get a little bit more of a gap between the two.
Yeah. And we've had a question about the name of the sweet pea from California. What was it again, please?
So you've got Winter Sunshine Series and Spring Sunshine Series.
And are they, I know my wife is a great grower of sweet peas, always get her seed from Roger Parsons. Could you get them from Roger Parsons?
Yeah, I mean, Roger Parsons is a great sweet pea seed supplier. Also, Owl Acre. It's a bit of a funny name, Owl Acre. They do the whole range of sunshine. They have very boring names. This one's just called Burgundy.
It's not very... There's on the tin.
I know. So yeah, check those out. Well worth trying if you've got a tunnel.
A couple of questions that are quite closely related. Where do you get these 10 centimetre deep plug modules from, and what's your preferred module tray?
Yeah, the trays are from PG Horticulture, and I think my trays are 96s. I have 96 plugs. So yeah,
great.
So they're very sturdy plastic. So I'm hoping to get a good, I don't know what year I'm on now, but a good few years use out of them.
I reckon, yeah, a good plant tray should do 5 years plus.
Yeah, I reckon. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Great. And Jared is asking whether he can buy it in the US. I don't know.
Buy the trays?
No, we're back to the seeds. Sorry, the winter sunshine series.
Well, I'm sure Florette would be happy to help him on that one. Erin from Florette, she does sell the sunshine series. I'm not sure if she's got any in stock at the moment, but I think she might be the only person that's got them in the States.
Great. Good.
Great. So, are there any sort of, I always like things that are sort of a bit of a paradox or a bit counterintuitive. Are there any plants you're growing that have actually been a real surprise for you, or something that that at first you thought, this really isn't going to do, but then in fact has done well, or any surprises?
Yeah, I mean,
Shepherd's Purse, which I think is a great one.
I think, yes, the Shepherd's Purse. Constantly, and actually, one of the reasons I really love doing workshops and inviting other florists to come and teach here as well, is to see what they pick and how they interpret the materials I grow. So they'll often, or even just people coming to pick a bucket of flowers, and I'll see them picking things or using things in a way that I never even would have thought of. And so that's really been, you know how it is when you teach, you often learn just as much.
And
that's very much been the case for me. And then obviously going and visiting other growers and seeing what they're doing and getting ideas. So this beautiful, let me see if I can pull one out. Oh, I've got a few things here actually that I can illustrate that point. Here's one. This is a stock. I don't know if you can see that. It's actually the ones that get selected out by the commercial growers. So it's a single flower. So when you see them in the shops, they always have they look like a column, don't they? A dense flower here. And that's because they're selecting the doubles. Well, I decided to have a look and see what those do. And actually, I almost prefer the look of the single to the double. So there's an unexpected find. And this is just a really stunning Linaria. And that's every year I'll just try things that I see in seed catalogues, or I'll see on Instagram that someone else is growing. And then I start to work with it in my floristry, and it becomes a keeper. And I think that definitely.
Linaria seems to be quite an up-and-coming genus. And I talked to Blake about them. I mean, they tend to be pretty short-lived and self-seed, but there are some that I think are sterile, so they keep on going that much longer. And I think he propagates them from cuttings, but he had some wonderful ones I was looking at last year.
Yeah, I think you could probably just do some simple little stem tip cuttings.
Yes.
But I mean, this was so easy from seed.
Have you got a cultivar name for that one?
It's Moroccana Peachy. It's not that peachy, really. It's got quite a lot of yellow in it, but I love that. That's what I mean about having more than one tone. That, to me, is what we call a bridge flower in floristry. So it connects perhaps some coral ranunculus with some apricot parrot tulips really beautifully. It'll bring those two together.
Questions are coming in fast and furious, and I want to keep up with them a little bit. I know, but just so we don't lose some of these. Joy Gray wants to know what would be suitable for a Christmas wedding.
I don't actually do Christmas weddings.
You've got to take a break sometime, haven't you?
Because that's quite a hard one. I mean, it's become very fashionable to dry flowers, and I do that quite a lot now, and grasses. So mixing those perhaps with evergreens, with things like larch, twiggy larch, I love. And that, if you wanted to stay just really seasonal, not use imported, I think that's the route you'd have to take. Perhaps some paper whites, amaryllis, to bring in a few larger, fresher blooms.
That would be.
I think that's what I try and do. And actually, saying that I don't do December weddings. I will be this year because some of mine have been postponed to December. So that will be a new challenge for me.
Oh, interesting. We've also got back to trays. There's a lot of tray talk today. So has Rachel,
we could do a whole webinar on trays, couldn't we?
has Rachel,
thing to do.
Has Rachel found any good biodegradable alternatives to modular seed trays? I'm trying to use fibre seed trays at the moment, but they dry out in about 5 seconds flat.
Yeah, I mean, my answer to that is no. I mean, I know growers that use soil blocks, but I'm not a fan of the soil block. To me, it's just not practical enough when you're growing in quantity. And the drying out is an issue for sure.
Yeah, but I think when I first started using plug trays quite a few years ago, I used to basically scrounge them off bedding plant nurseries, basically haul them out of their skips. And after a couple of years, I worked out that some of them were turning out, these ones that are made of really hard plastic that were clearly designed to be used year in, year out. But I've never seen them for sale. They're the sort of thing that would probably last at least 10 years.
Right. Well, I would say that if you look after these recommended, I reckon they could last years.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's carry on.
Anyway, let's move on. We had a question about, do you grow pansies or violas for cutting?
I do. I grow one which is this sort of natural. It's called Natural Antique Shades. It's just a very simple, very easy from seed, beautiful little viola. Okay, the stem length is probably no more than 15 to 20 centimeters, but again, when you do event work, that doesn't matter. I think that's one of the reasons I like doing event work, because it means that I can grow whatever I like. And it's interesting now that I'm doing this bucket delivery service, I'm finding that obviously that is not the case. I couldn't shove a few violas in the bottom of someone's bucket.
Yeah.
Well,
that leads nicely into a question about conditioning for event flowers. This is from Karen Fitz. For event flowers, what conditioning systems do you use?
Well, all we do is pick early and put them into deep buckets of water into a big walk-in chiller. And that's 24 hours before we actually are going to be working with them. So if it's a Saturday wedding, we pick on the Thursday, they're conditioned, and then we can bring them out and work on them on the Friday. And yeah, I mean, they're so fresh. You know, we've never actually, I can't think of one time when someone's complained that their flowers haven't held and haven't.
Fantastic. Pat Hold wants to know, who do you follow on Instagram for inspiration?
Oh, so many. And, you know, I mean, lots and lots of different flower growers and florists around the world. Who do I follow? People I love, styles I really like. People like Sarah from Simply by Arrangement, Erin, of course, in America, Florette, Moss and Stone, Shane Connolly, love his work. I mean, there's a lot of these people have been here and have taught classes here on the farm using my materials. Sarah Winwood, really like her style. And I also do follow certain nurseries. Like I'm watching Arnie Maynard on his little garden tours at the moment, and Jimmy Blake doing his tours. And I do follow lots of other kind of artists, or I follow potters, sewers, knitters.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about pots actually, because I remember we had a discussion about ceramics once.
Yeah.
Yes, perhaps you could talk us a little bit about that match between the container and the flowers.
Yeah, so I started pottery quite a few years ago with really just the interest of making my own vessels, so that I could get to the point one day of really matching the vessel to my flowers and getting the shapes that I wanted, because I was quite frustrated with the lack of interesting vessels out there. You know, these sort of very sort of you know, factory made from China. Everyone's using the same stuff. Like if you wanted a footed bowl, yeah, it was just some piece of crap, to be honest, from China that probably leaked. And I thought, you know, my flowers, I put so much effort into producing real quality that it seemed to let them down, to dress them in something like that had none of its own character. So yeah, it's an ongoing thing that I do through the winter when I'm not growing.
Are any of the pots on your mantelpiece behind you any of yours?
Yes, this one here.
Lovely.
One of my little. I mean, you know, I wouldn't say that's a masterpiece, but hey, I quite like it.
Well, in fact, that's how we met, Rachel. You were at West Dean doing a course with Ali in ceramics.
Yeah, and actually, when we met, that was one of the pots that I was making.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah. So that's fantastic. Oh, good.
Okay.
Well, one question, actually. I have this morning I was thinking about what to ask you, and I had this sort of dim childhood memory of this sort of vague conflict between my father and my mother. My mother, who I think, on looking back, probably was a pretty good flower arranger, and she certainly had all the kit and lots of those little spiky things.
Oh yeah, the frogs.
Yes, and my father, who gardened, and my mother never touched the soil, and so and she was always after things in the garden to cut it. And I said, vaguely, maybe not having this sort of certain conflict. Is this a familiar one to you? Any ideas on marital resolutions on this one?
Yeah, very familiar. And I think if you are going to pick from your garden, the only way to do it is to create a separate cutting patch where you are growing your cut flowers in rows, like you would in your veg garden. And very much seeing them as a crop. As you start to think, oh, I'll just put them in amongst my flower borders, you're just not going to pick them. And I've had the same thing in my own back garden, where I think, yeah, I could use that. I never ever do. So I'm the same, because you know, you've created that picture, haven't you? You don't.
Yeah.
And Rachel, sort of following on from that question, flower farming, I mean, maybe it's a sort of Instagram generation, but flower farming seems to be quite popular. But what do you think about the gender split? I mean, are there more men going into it now? Does it seem to be a predominantly female thing? You know, what's your feeling on that and where it's going, perhaps?
Yeah, it's very much predominantly female, even though I have to say Green and Gorgeous is actually very much me and my partner Ashley. Even though he's a bit more behind the scenes, it is a 50-50, business. But I do feel sad when I have big get-togethers with other flower farmers, or go to things. It's always pretty much all women with the token, a few token guys, and I just think, well, why?
Yeah.
I think there are a few more coming in. I've noticed a few more coming onto my
Black Shed. Isn't there a guy in Somerset called
Black Shed, Paul? There's a really lovely chap, John, Lakes and Rivers, whose flower farm, who's just starting out. It's his first year, and he's going great guns. So I think there are a few more coming into it, but I wish there was a way to, I don't know, encourage a bit more of a balance. Yeah.
We've got a question from Hester over in Cork, and she's asking, tell us how you support flowers and foliage within the vase. And I'm not sure whether Hester means tall, maybe she just means at the base, as you were talking about those sort of old-fashioned little frogs in the bottom. What have you got any techniques?
Yeah, I think she was probably referring to perhaps when you do a kind of bowl arrangement or a fan vase where you have that very wide opening. And of course, we don't want to use florist foam. That is just off the menu. So frogs, the pin holders are very useful. There's some really good ones out there now, really well made, that don't rust, particularly from Japan, where they call them Kenzan.
Yeah, Kenzan.
Kenzan, yeah. But also, just a good bit of chicken wire.
Yeah.
Just quite large holes. Don't go for the small holes. That it's got to be quite firm chicken wire. It's got a bit of resistance, and we just tend to make that into a ball that has perhaps a slight concertina to it. So it's got like maybe 2 or 3 layers within the ball, and that gets scrunched up and squashed into the bowl, and then it gets fixed in with perhaps some pop tape, waterproof florist tape to hold it in. It works a treat. You know, you have to, I mean, you do have to get, it's a different way of arranging. You know, it's not like just sticking it into a lump of foam. It's a little bit more care and time, but you soon get used to it, and it just actually gives a much more natural look.
Yeah.
Thinking back to my possibly misspent adolescence, but I was quite into Japanese flower arranging, and a couple of other boys from my school were as well, actually, you know, real deviants very clearly. And that was, of course, very sparing in its use of materials. It was obviously quite influential at the time. But is that still influential?
Very much so. That idea of negative space is really well, I know a lot of florists that really focus their arranging around that, and they don't want to over cram, and things are very carefully placed. I'm not saying it's Ikebana, it's just, and also the whole thing about imperfection. You know, you'll see a leaf with a hole in, and they've actually specifically chosen that leaf, haven't they?
Yeah.
And I think that's become very popular concept. So there's lots of things that can be taken from Ikebana, and I've been to Japan, and I did an Ikebana course there, but I would love to learn more about it.
And we've got, on these aesthetic issues, we've got a question here. Could you tell us a bit more about filler and foliage versus focus?
Yes, yeah. So it's very easy when you're growing cut flowers to put too much thought into growing focal flowers, which actually, if you look at a cutting patch, that's the smallest quantity that you need. In a sort of an average bouquet, you might only use like 5 to 7 focal flowers. It's the filler and the foliage that really make out the majority, the bulk of that arrangement. And foliage is often overlooked. And I always would say to people, if you're starting a new patch, a new cutting patch, plant your foliage first, plant your shrubs, because of course they're going to take a while, and you need those woody stems. They're your structure. They hold the arrangement together, whether it's a bouquet or in a vase. So I think that is an area where you need to perhaps get that balance, 2/3 foliage and filler, and only 1/3 focal flowers.
Interesting. Yeah. Good. Any more questions coming in from anybody? We're sort of getting through our question list quite well. Any last questions? Silence. Oh, this has been really, really interesting. Thank you, Rachel.
Oh, my pleasure.
So have you shown us everything you can show us?
Oh, probably not.
I can see a daffodil poking up there somewhere. Can I?
Yes. Yeah, I can't actually remember the name of this one, but I mean, I love narcissus. We grow, I don't know, gosh, 20, 30 different varieties. The heat of the weekend did kind of frazzle them up a bit. Yeah. But this is always the last one to flower, that little peach cup. And it was going to be part of a bouquet to go with the peach ranunculus. And here, it's gone a bit floppy, but I do love using a bit of raven's wing. The foliage is particularly, it has to be well conditioned. So something like this might need to be seared, just dipped in boiling water for a few seconds, just to get it to hold, and then given a really good drink before working with it. Otherwise, it's going to be a bit too soft. What else have we got? We've got some Cerinthe, honeywort. Love that, the colour of that. So I would call that a foliage, really, element. To me, it's mostly about the foliage. And then some polemonium, using lots of those at the moment. What else have we got? Some interesting tulips. That's a rather lovely one. I do love that. And this is the week of the parrot tulips. Because we're getting to the end of the tulips now. This is probably their last week, and the parrots always come last. And this is called James Last, and it is such a beauty.
And we've got a couple of more questions, again, quite practical ones.
Yeah.
About do you have irrigation? Do you protect flowers from insects and damage?
Yes, we do. We do have irrigation. Gosh, I mean, we've just got a bit of a drought, haven't we? I feel like we've just been. I know it's rained all winter, but it feels like we're in drought again now, and we've already had the irrigation on this year. So everything has it's called T-tape. It's like a little leaky hose type thing, and that is literally on all of the rows across the entire 4 acres. And without that, all our stems would be about that long. With the lack of rain we keep having, just seem to get stuck in these weather patterns, don't we? And of course then that does bring on issues with pests, because the plants are stressed. So at the moment we have quite bad black fly already on our viburnum, which makes it really virtually unpickable, because I won't spray. I don't use any pesticides. So what people say, what do you do? I just say I grow a lot. So I've got
diversity. Spread your risk.
Hedging your bets. I'm always saying about hedging your bet. And so, like the viburnum opulus roseums, a 25-meter row. So in amongst that, there is some that hasn't got black fly on. And actually, the ones that have got black fly are being enjoyed by the ladybirds and the wasps at the moment. So, which might come in handy for something else later in the year. So I think it's quite hands-off. It's a hands-off, trying to be relaxed approach is what I recommend.
We've got a couple of people asking the same question. Interesting seed companies to buy perennial seeds from.
Yeah, I mean, I would always say Yolito.
Yolito.
Yeah, my number one.
Yes.
I think their seeds are absolutely fantastic. The quality, everything I get from them germinates beautifully.
Wow.
No, everything is tested very, very thoroughly.
Yeah.
They've got a terrific pricing structure, huge range of plants. No, they're amazing.
Yeah, I mean, the range is incredible. So every year, I mean, it's like a book, isn't it? The catalogue.
Yes, and of course that incredible set of germination instructions in the back, which is one of the most useful sort of single bits of A4 I think you can ever come across in horticulture.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I always say to people, if you're not that confident a propagator, go for numbers 15 and 16 on the... Because those are the easy ones. And actually, a lot of them are 15 and 16, so you're all there. And then I do actually get a lot of seeds from the States as well. There's a lot of cut flower varieties out there that you can't get in this country. People like Johnny's seeds are particularly good, but it has got trickier now.
And actually, I think mole's seed for sort of larger quantities.
Moles, again, very fresh, good quality seed. You can really rely on moles. The range is not quite so exciting. Chiltern seeds, I use them a lot. They're just up the road from me, so they'll often come here. To talk about varieties for cutting and see what I'm growing, and then I sort of nag them about things that they should be stocking. So they're very good for annuals, I would say, Chiltern.
Yeah. And have you got any favourite shrubs for foliage? You talked about the Physocarpus, but any other sort of, top ones that you really wouldn't do without?
Yeah. Going again with that bronzy colour, I do love Rose of Glauca.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't grow it for its flowers. We prune it hard every year, so we just get that lovely smoky plum coloured foliage. not only is the colour interesting, but the form, you know, it's so important for me to look at the form of plants, and that has a lovely, quite a sort of curvy line to it. You know, I don't want ramrod straight stems of foliage. Do not suit my style. What else do I use? I do use a lot of eucalyptus, actually. And there's a eucalyptus nursery called Grafton Nurseries. I think they're based in Worcestershire, and they have that's all they grow is eucalyptus, but just so many different varieties. So they're worth checking out. There are some really good hardy varieties out there, and you know, obviously eucalyptus is so generous and fast growing, and that can be quite important.
Yeah, we've got a lovely question from Nora Bowser saying, I've tried all sorts of voodoo to keep my lilacs from going limp. How do you do it?
Yeah, the lilac. Well, actually mine is a bit limp at the moment, but that's I'll show you. That's partly because I've only just picked it, but can you see I've taken all the leaves off?
Ah, right.
So that's number one, what you've got to do. Number two is making a cross cut. So you cut up, literally up the stem, and then again up the stem, so you're forming a cross. Now, if you really want to take it to another level, you sear that in boiling water. So you dip that an inch deep in boiling water for 30 seconds, and then put it into a deep bucket of water for 24 hours before you use it. So picking things at the right stage. I didn't pick this, by the way. Ash did, my partner. But I would have actually waited for a few more of these florets to be open before I picked it. Sometimes you can pick things a bit too soft.
Matt Jackson's asking, is there a durable, multi-seasonal, non-plastic pea and bean netting that you recommend for stretching across delphiniums and cosmos, etc.?
I'm afraid I use the plastic one.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, for delphiniums, we quite like to use galvanized stock netting.
Oh.
You know, stock fencing.
Yeah.
Our delphiniums are so enormous that bean netting just doesn't cut it. It needs to be something sturdier. Now, I have seen on Instagram people using a kind of jute netting, but I don't know where they're getting that from, but that would be a good, you know, biodegradable option.
Yeah. And there was another really lovely question somewhere, but it's
sorry, how you made the transition from being a garden designer to a flower farmer?
How did I?
Yes.
Well, I got a little bit disillusioned with garden design. I just realised that you need to be really good at it. I didn't feel I was good enough. Quite hard, isn't it? And also, I just actually was getting to the point where I wanted to get into productive horticulture. So I got a job on a private estate growing vegetables, organic vegetables, fruits and cut flowers. And I thought, I really want to give this a go. I didn't know anything about how to do that, but they gave me the job and sent me on lots of courses. And that's really how I moved across into cut flower growing.
And Amber's question is, how boiling is this is lovely. How boiling is boiling? Is it freshly boiled?
It's boiling, it's straight from the kettle. You know, sometimes we do actually use hot water, hand hot water, for doing that sort of technique with dahlias. So when you've got those real dinner plate, like cafe au lait dahlias, and you want them to last as long as possible, you just fill a bucket with hand hot water, not because if it was boiling, it's fine for a woody stem like a lilac, but it would just melt, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
It would just cook. Hand hot. So different temperatures for different flowers.
And actually, Tracy McHugh very kindly has put up a website for jute netting, which is gardening-naturally.com, which is, thank you, Tracy. That's lovely. So
there we go.
garden-naturally.com. That's brilliant. I think, Rachel, we could ask you questions for another 4 hours, but I think you'd be on the floor. This has been so interesting, and you know, I mean, from when we first met at West Dean, you know, I just love your aesthetic, you know, and I think if people just look at Rachel's website, who does your photography? It's amazing. Do you do it yourself?
It's a mixture. Some of it, like Instagram's mine, and then I work with this wonderful photographer called Eva Nemeth.
Oh yeah.
Does a lot of work for Gardens Illustrated and people like that. Have a look at her work. It's beautiful.
Yeah. But, and of course, Rachel, you're one of our tutors on Garden Masterclass as well, which is fantastic. But I think, you know, I just want to say thank you very much. It's been wonderful, and I'm sure if we weren't in lockdown, there's no way we'd be able to get you to sit down for 5 minutes or an hour. I say 5 minutes and answer so many really, really practical questions. I'm getting lots of people saying thank you very much. Rachel is an impressive woman. That's from Angela.
Oh.
Yes.
I agree with that. I think you are.
Great. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Rachel. It's been great.
It's been my pleasure. It's nice to chat and see a few people.
Yeah. Well, I hope things, you know, pick up, and I'm really pleased that the you know, garden gate to front door. What are you calling it? Your
field. It's called Field to Doorstep.
Field to Doorstep. Brilliant.
Yeah, and I'm doing a little IGTV farm walk every Sunday.
Right.
So to show people what we're going to be including in people's buckets, and just to show people what we're growing, you know. So
you know, of course, the dilemma next spring is people are going to want that as well as the event. So what are you going to do?
You know what? I think I might still do it for April, because I always have more flowers than I need for events. So I might actually just pick it up for certain times of the year and offer it. Yeah.
It is interesting how this whole situation we're in at the moment is making people go into different directions, which, you know, certainly does have its positive aspects as well.
Yeah, I agree.
Diversification.
Yeah, definitely. It's quite a positive thing in that way, for sure.
Okay, well, I think we should sign off and let you go and carry on. And thank you so much, Rachel. It's been wonderful. Really wonderful.
Thanks, guys. Okay.
Thank you. We'll see you all tomorrow.
Yes.
Okay. Oh, okay. Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. Stay safe.